Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You might see us all smiling, but right over here at my place, it's 3 a.m. And yes, we are recording yet another interview, this time with the America's seasonal champion, Duckling. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Castman. Thank you for having me on, and I know it's a bit late for you, so I really appreciate that.
Just a little bit late, but for gamers, it is never late. Congratulations for the win because out of the four lineups of the seasonal winners, I think yours was the most creative. But we're going to get to that one just in a tiny bit. First and foremost, this is the first question I'm asking everyone. Can you tell us a bit about who you are in real life? Like not the person that's playing the card games, who you are in real life.
Yeah, of course. So in real life, I have a corporate finance job that I work Monday through Friday, and
You sound
you
excited.
know, yeah, it's definitely not as interesting as playing video games, but it's a good job, and I think I appreciate the aspect. Like the people that I work with, rather. Sorry, I worded that poorly. I appreciate the people that I work with, and it makes it a lot better. And I like to ski in the winter and go on hikes in the summer, as far as like hobbies and stuff.
Do you think that you are using any skills that you are using during your work in card games as well, for example?
Uh hmm. I'd say that's mostly athletic. I don't think there's too much strategy in that. I was into Brazilian jiu-jitsu a while back, and that was something that I felt like used a lot of your mental as well. It was like a lot of people like would compare grappling people essentially to like a chess match, and I can definitely see the comparisons there.
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, have you been practicing for a lot? Now I'm curious because I'm a martial artist myself.
Yeah. So I started freshman year of college, and then I went for like a year after college, like all the way through college, and then like a year after college. So for like 5 years about.
That sounds pretty cool. So, if you are messing with Duckling, he's not going to only beat you in LOR, he's going to beat you in real life.
That's
Probably.
right.
What is your background in terms of card game? Besides Legends of Runeterra, what did you play before coming to the era?
Yeah, so I've pretty much played every mainstream card game. When I was a kid, I used to love Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon, and then I got into Hearthstone when that came out, and I got into Legend in Hearthstone, and that was like pretty much where I peaked in that game. I never really like played in any tournaments or anything like that, but uh, yeah, I liked playing like meme decks in that game too. Every card game I play, I always play meme decks. I don't know what it is.
You said you didn't play any tournaments in Hearthstone, but you did play tournaments in any card game before Hearthstone in any paper game.
No.
Why?
uh, I don't know. It was like I from the different areas that I lived, I feel like I didn't necessarily have access to it, like at the time that I was into it. So like when I was into Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff like that, like I was really young. And I know like nowadays, like you see like super young kids in tournaments and stuff like that, but I don't know. I wasn't really interested in that. It was just more about like the cards looking cool, you know, and then like when I got into Hearthstone, I was a bit more interested in the competitive side, but then stuff in like my personal life took priority.
You sound exactly just like me in kindergarten. I was just looking at the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I had no idea what they were doing. They were pretty colorful. They looked cool. I was just slamming them on the board. No questions asked.
Exactly.
And how did you pick up Legends of Runeterra or competitive Legends of Runeterra? What brought you here?
Yeah, so I used to play League of Legends, and when Riot made the announcement that they were coming out with the card game, I started playing like during the beta, and I thought it was a ton of fun and brought me back to the good old Hearthstone days. And I always saw myself as like a very like strategic person. Like I'm pretty into chess as well, uh, and it just kind of felt like a natural fit. I really liked the way that they did certain things with the game, The being pretty receptive to community feedback, the way that both players have a turn on each turn. I really like that aspect. It's definitely a lot different than any other game I played before, any other card game. And the spell mana also adds its whole aspect to it, right? So it's like I just think that they, to sum it all up, I think that they like really hit the nail on the head when it comes to a lot of different aspects of the card games. And they took out the RNG aspects too. Sorry, I forgot to include that. I don't know. I'm rambling here, but yeah, it was just pretty much that they killed the game, and it made it really enjoyable and easy to incentivize me to want to climb.
Perfect, and I think this is kind of the feeling of people that are coming from pretty much any other card game. Other card games just want to buy some packs, they are making that grind very slowly and painful, and then you are coming to Legends of Runeterra, and after I think 2 weeks at least, you are already having a complete deck you can go on ladder.
Yes, yeah. That's another aspect I didn't even touch on, but you're totally right. It's way cheaper to get into this game. It's not nearly as much of a financial investment. You pretty much have everything you need
Out of
in a couple weeks.
curiosity, did you have any? What was your first deck when you started with Legends of Runeterra, or what was your first real deck?
Okay, so actually, I do remember the first deck that I built was a catastrophe deck with the Pursuit of Perfection. I saw that and I was like, oh wait, this is sick. What?
I
A
want
30/30
that.
with
I'm gonna
Overwhelm?
build that.
uh, and then I also like really liked the idea of Teemo decks and like putting shrooms in the opponent's deck. Like that to me is really like a funny idea of them just like drawing cards and dying to the cards that they draw. So that ended up going full circle and we win seasonals with the Teemo deck. So
I mean, putting mushrooms in someone's deck, I think, started as a meme. Like, nobody really saw Timo as an actual win condition of putting mushrooms. And then decks like Timo Israel appear, and then X-Core is coming as a new card, and then things start to snowball, and putting mushrooms in your opponent's deck is actually becoming a win. You mentioned Timo, and from the current card pool, do you have any favorite card deck? Is it Timo or is it another card?
from the current card pool, um, Teemo's definitely up there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm forgetting. Yeah, it's got to be Tito. It's got to be Tito, man. I really do enjoy Tito.
I guess you and Fresh Lobster are good buddies, or if not, you are going to. I know he has a certain affection for Timo as well. Do you have any card that
Yeah.
you hate, that you despise?
Tri-beam and Probulator. So I'm pretty happy to see that get nerfed today.
Why? Why do you hate it?
There's too much of an RNG aspect to the card, in my opinion. And I know it sounds ironic since I like Tito because there's RNG in that too, but it's like game deciding RNG, I guess. Like it feels it feels really bad when you're playing like an aggro or burn deck, right, against them, and they just like drill a lifesteal unit off the Tri-beam and Probulator, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay, well played, I guess. It's like one of the few cards in the game that just like can like single-handedly just decide the match on pure RNG, and they've done a good job of staying away from that.
So it can also help you as the one playing against the game, because we all know Tribeam on free, pretty nice, but not for you, maybe for your opponent. Solitary Monk, you are just revoking everything you have built.
Right.
We've been talking about cards that you like, cards that you dislike, so another question would be, do you have any card that you identify yourself with, that you have some similarities with in some sort of way?
Ooh. I mean, as you know, I am a duck at heart, so I'd say I'm like kind of like a mixed breed between like Azir and Anivia. It's probably like my closest connection.
Well, if you are going to make it even further in words, maybe they are going to make something like a custom artwork for one of the two. Or
Oh,
both,
that'd be
or a
pretty sick.
mix. Yeah, that would be sick. So, some of the people do not know, but I think we have the legendary section, not the legacy section in the skins filters. So we might get some some card skins with the champions in. Who knows?
Yeah,
uh
I mean that'd be sweet. We had like a duck skin for one of them. Like duck skin for Tito would be ideal. Like a little duck hat, like you can picture it,
okay, Riot, listen to this man. He's having some ideas over here. That's pretty fun. Speaking of fun, do you remember any fun or any sad moments during the game? You mentioned Tribeam Black. Maybe you had some sad story with Tribeam
In the seasonal tournament or just like in general?
in
Just
general.
in general. Y- yeah, that's one of the more negative experiences for sure. I feel like honestly a lot of the more memorable negative experiences in the game are all related around Tribeam and Probulator. That's why I'm a big hater on that card. Like things are like temporary, you know. Like Aphelios was really annoying at one point, right? Like uh, like every meta has that deck that's just like kind of like annoying to play against. But I feel like the thing that's felt like lastingly annoying is Tribeam and Probulator.
Yes, I think you get this because when you're coming to LOR, or at least in the open beta, you are coming to this game that is not relying that much on are looking at other games. Hearthstone comes to mind because it's the most popular example. We are having tons of RNG, a lot of things happen and they are not in your control. And then you are coming to Legends of Runeterra, and it's the promise of this game that doesn't rely that much on RNG and more on your skill as a player.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
Speaking of the game, let's move a bit towards the tournament because this is why we're here. And how was your experience in the Swiss Open rounds? What did you bring over there in terms of decks?
So I actually brought the exact same lineup card for card, no changes between the open rounds and the top 32. And the reasoning for that was that I'd actually brought this lineup at a tournament before that and did really well. This exact same lineup I brought into uh, Majimbe and Jason's tournament that they have there, and I got top 8 with it, and it felt really consistent in there. And like I think that I could have done better if I didn't misplay. So I just kind of like practiced with the decks themselves, and it just made sense that it was just my whole reasoning behind it was that there's a lot of Targon and Deep in the current meta, and Azir Relia, I don't believe that it's a smart idea to try to counter that deck because let's face it, even if you go to counter it, it's still sometimes just going to get a cheap win out on you, and it's not it's there's decks that beat it, but there's nothing that beats it at a high enough percentage to justify building an entire lineup to counter it. So in my opinion, it's better off just to ban that deck and choose a deck that's like tier 2, tier 3, that's going to be popular and counter that. That's what we went with.
And why keep the same lineup? Was it more like a comfort choice, or was there any other reason keeping the same lineup going from Swiss rounds to?
So I felt very certain that So I was definitely conflicted. Like I was definitely considering if I want to change up the lineup or not. But I felt really certain once I looked at the decks that were brought into to make it, or the decks that people used to make it into the top 32, and it was something like 25 out of the 32 decks, or 25 out of the 32 lineups, I should say, had either Deep or Targon in their lineup, and that's exactly what we were trying to counter. And also we do really well against Turbo Thralls too. There was a bit more than that than I expected, but that ended up being like a cherry on top.
Like this is the strategy when you're going, or at least in Swiss, in top cut, you are expecting people to bring more control. What do I wanna do? Do I want to win against these control decks, or do I wanna prepare against that one random guy that is bringing triple aggro? Kind of.
Exactly. And like honestly, we were definitely unfavored against triple aggro, but I faced triple aggro 3 times on the first day. And the only time I lost was against Mo, and it was like super tight too. And the other two we actually won. So we definitely could beat triple aggro with the lineup. It definitely feels unfavored. You do have to get a bit lucky, but I didn't feel like it was an auto loss either.
Yeah. Speaking about lineups that are a bit scary, did you have any opponent that you were actually afraid of facing? Maybe in Swiss, maybe in Top Cut, in any of them?
Yeah. So once I saw the bracket, I thought it was pretty likely I was going to run into 4LW. And that was definitely one that I was intimidated by because the lineup that he brought to the top 32 was actually different than the lineup that he brought once he was in the top 32. Um, and that lineup was a lot scarier for me. It was like TLC, Aurelia Azir, and um, like Draven or something. It was like there was no Targon deck in there. There was no deep. Um, yeah, nothing that I like can like solidly say I'm definitely gonna 2-0 this.
And was his lineup the only one that took you by surprise, or what meta did you expect to encounter in Top Cut?
Um, so pretty much exactly that. Like I was expecting to run into a lot of Targon and a lot of deep, and and just kind of like anybody who brought that, I felt like we had a really good chance of 2-0ing them, 2-0ing that deck at least. And and then everything else we were just kind of solid against. I didn't touch on this either. I want to say this too. One of the things that I really liked about the matron deck is that a lot of people are like familiar with the deck, but don't necessarily have a ton of experience against it, and don't necessarily know like what to ban when they run into my lineup. Right? Like I talked to Jocko a lot, Jocko Wacko, the guy that got second, and he uh, still, I'm not sure if he's 100% certain on what he should have been. You know what I mean? Even after having all this time to think about it, and like I totally get that. Like I don't know from his perspective what the right call was there either. It's just, so I think there's a little bit of an edge there too, in just in that part as well.
I mean, in general, I think when I'm looking at that Matron contra C3 Matron, I'm like, all right, how does this deck play? What should I be careful around? Because it's like a deck you do not know how to play around. It doesn't have a certain win con, and it's, I think, pretty difficult to pilot as well. But speaking of the devil, we are going to move to the decks, and we are going to talk about first and foremost the Citra Matron deck and what was the reasoning behind bringing this.
Yeah, of course. So we touched on it a bit to an extent, but I can definitely get more in depth. So some of the main things are that I saw how stacked the top 32 was. Right, like this is probably of all the seasonals, probably had like the most stacked top 32 that we've ever seen. Like there's so many really consistent, strong players in that. So bringing something that's going to throw people off a little bit, and maybe not something that they're used to practicing against, I think is can give us a little bit of edge that we could really use when we're up against such strong players that just really aren't going to be making misplays. Um, in addition to that, the deck itself counters Targon and it counters Deep, which is really nice. Does very well into both of those matchups. We built the deck in a very greedy way. So we have triple mobilize and we have 9 different cards that draw. So like this deck is not built for the ladder. It's built specifically, right? We only run 2 single combats. It's built specifically to make the combo as consistent as possible. And ideally get the combo as consistently as possible before turn 8. So it'll very consistently have the combo at turn 8, and I'd say probably like 60 to 70% of the time it'll have it before then as well, in a non-ephemeral version. And like if you include with the Islander, it'll get there a lot. So that's pretty much the goal.
I need to ask you, because this deck still seems weird to me and the concept itself. What are the tech choices in this deck and why are there?
Yeah. So fading memories. Uh, well, here I'll just start off here. Uh, there are a couple one-ofs in this deck, which I was gonna, people argue takes away from the consistency of the deck. That's like a strong argument that a lot of people make all the time about deck building, that everything has to be 3-ofs. I don't necessarily agree with that, especially when it comes to the tournament format. It's very annoying when you see that your opponent has like one of Sharp Sight that you have to worry about and one of Vile Feast that you have to play around, opposed to just 3 Vile Feast or 3 Sharp Sight. It adds the more flexibility, and especially when we have a very heavy card draw card deck like this, it makes it likely that we're still going to consistently run into those answers, even though we don't run multiple copies of them. So Fading Memories is in the deck as a way of it could be used on a lot of different things. You can use it to copy Spectral Matron again. You can use it on Spirit Leech if you're desperate for a little bit more draw. You can use it most commonly. This is the thing that I shouldn't say most commonly, but something that I expected to have to use it on, and I actually did, is against Targon, Piltover, and Zon. A lot of times that the only way that they're winning that matchup is if they can cheese you out with like a Great Beyond. So this is a really cool card to just copy their elusive and play it in response to them developing the Great Beyond, and then that buys you the one extra turn you need to just finish them off with Matron the next turn. And that situation happens a lot more than you think, trust me. And Sharp Sight can also save you in that exact same situation, of course. Vile Feast, it's just very flexible. It's nice to just have like a little bit of ping as an option, because there's literally nothing else in our deck that can do that. And it also makes a unit too, which could be clutch in some spots where you're trying to set up the ideal board before you combo.
I'm seeing this mentality in tournaments quite a lot. Even though I'm making my deck quote unquote less consistent, I do like to play one-offs because I'm tricking my opponent into thinking I might have something, I might not have something. I'm having a lot of one-offs. And one question I didn't ask the other players, but I would like to ask you is: do you consider yourself a good person at bluffing those cards in specific situations?
Yes, definitely. Definitely I do. I with this deck, I'd say it's very easy to bluff in those spots because a lot of times you're just floating spell mana anyways because you play very passively in a lot of the matchups. So it's just like they just always have to worry about it that you have it. And there's not much they can do.
And you said this list is not ladder ready, but what would you do for it to be ladder ready or playable at least in this meta? Because we're going to have a new meta, and God knows what's gonna happen then.
Yeah, it's hard to make that call, but I'd say you definitely want a third single combat on ladder for starters. Probably can greed a little bit less on the triple Islander, triple mobilize. You can cut down on some of those. Add in a third Radiant Guardian and a third of the 3-drop Challenger, and also the 5-drop Challenger Dragon. Forget the name of it. Those all those cards could probably be
So
added to
you
the
would
deck.
want more Laurent Protégés and Screeching.
Mm-hmm. And a third single combat, yeah. And you could probably cut back on like the Vile Feast and Sharp Sight and stuff to, as far as like cards to replace those with.
So let's move forward to the next that you have been bringing, and the other one is Teemo Ezreal. You said you are loving Teemo. You said you are loving to kill your opponents with mushrooms. So why is this deck here? Why is this deck in this? What did you want to do?
So this deck actually feels to me like a pretty high skill cap deck. There's a lot of things you can do to like really outplay the opponent, in my opinion. Once you like fully understand the matchups, the main goal of this deck, similar to the other one, is that this deck just absolutely destroys Targon. Like my win rate with this deck against Targon is pretty ridiculous. It's just not really fair. Like you full mulligan for Foundry every time against them. Don't even keep Teemo. And there's 5 different cards in here that'll draw in the event that you don't find Foundry to make it very consistent that you do. And to be honest, I've even won games against Targon where I didn't find Foundry, so it's not even that you like 100% need it, but obviously it helps. And yeah, the one of Aftershock is the event that I ran into Tom Kench Soraka, and then also a little bit of support against Turbo Thralls. Thinking if there's anything else that's like really unique about the list.
Did you actually expect to
pretty much it.
face Tom Kench Soraka in the top cut?
I did think there was a decent chance, yeah, that somebody would bring it, and it really is the only card. So all my other decks beat Tom Kench Soraka really hard. Like they can't deal with TF Fizz because you just elusive swarm, and they have 3 hushes that they can work with, and that's it to deal with that. They can't deal with Matron Cythria because you just don't play units until you combo, and then your units are literally bigger than their Tom Kench, so it doesn't matter. And then this deck here, they can beat if they get their Star Spring off early enough, and they can, just like keep healing up their units. But if you have an Aftershock in the deck, it goes a really long way in making it so that you don't lose that matchup. So and again, it's a card that you can just run as a one of because you're typically going to be really like cycling through your deck, and you just in that matchup, I'd keep that in my starting hand or Foundry and just full mulligan everything else. And then, like I said, yeah, it's really good against thralls. It ended up being really clutch in one of my games in the series against thralls, where I was able to actually kill a blighted ravine, different target than I was expecting, but it ended up winning me the game. So
Um, yes, sometimes I think people are playing in their trolls decks, they are playing Atalia, and they're copying sometimes Blighted Ravines because it's so versatile. You are getting that health back, you are getting double removal with the double trigger proc. Yeah, it's definitely a good target for your after proc. But I need to ask you, what else? What would you expect in that Tom Kench Raka lineup, for example? You said you were expecting fair chance that might be one. What other decks would you have expected alongside it?
So I did end up running into one person who did actually bring it, but we never ended up facing them. We just 2-0'd their Turbo Thralls list. But yeah, they brought that deck Turbo Thralls, and I think Aurelia Azir were the three decks. I don't necessarily know what somebody would bring with Tom Kench Soraka. I guess I'd have to think about what that matchup table looks like, right? I think I've heard that it's favored against Thresh Nasus, but like not as much anymore since Bakai Reaper came, or not Bakai Reaper, the 4/3 what gives a vulnerable. You know what I'm talking about?
We
Yeah.
don't want to talk about that one. It didn't get nerfed.
Yeah.
I don't think you. I think you are missing the name on purpose, so we're going to leave it like that.
Yeah, ever since the card that we don't talk about came out, I think that matchup actually became favored against it. So I'm not sure exactly. Tom Kench has always been like an anti-meta deck in a way, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think all three of the top meta decks, being TLC, uh, Azir Aurelia,
Fresh Nasus.
and Thresh Nasus, probably all beat it, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm not sure why somebody would bring it, to be honest, and what lineup they'd bring it with, but it just feels like one of those decks that people like can go to as like a unique pick in a tournament.
Duckling, I'm gonna cut it for you. They want to bring it because they wanna have fun. Okay. It doesn't matter if they win or not. Maybe there are persons like you that they want to bring a funky lineup, quote unquote, but a lineup that they enjoy playing. Who knows?
That's fair. That's fair.
Talking about decks that you enjoy playing, your last deck is something that we haven't seen a lot of in a long time, to be fair, unless you are Filthy Gamer Whip. And we're talking about Feast EF. And why Feast EF? Why good old Feast EF?
So another deck that I have had a ton of practice on. The deck still feels incredibly strong if you know how to play the matchups and you know how to mulligan in the matchups. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's something that I'm comfortable with. It has a similar matchup spread as the rest of my decks, which is very key. It's not just random. This deck also completely destroys Targon decks. Uh, if played correctly, of course. And I think it's a deck as well that people probably don't have a ton of experience playing against in the current meta. So in the old meta, right, like they know what to expect and everything like that, but someone might not realize like just how bad a matchup is for them against this deck, just because they're not used to running into it on the ladder. If that makes sense.
Definitely. I think the deck doesn't need much of an introduction because it has been terrorizing the meta for some time now. A few patches ago, now it is tuned down, it has been nerfed. So maybe remind the people, what do you want to actually do with this deck?
Yeah, of course. So in the Targon matchup, for example, since I keep referencing that one, the main goal of what you want to do is you don't care at all about leveling up your TF. You're just trying to cycle and get as many spells cast as possible. So ideally, you have a early ballistic bot or two, and then you just want a combo on your turn with Mind Meld, but you run 2 times Mind Meld in the deck. So ideally, you just get a very wide board on your opponent's turn, and then you open up with the Mind Meld on your turn, making all your units like 15/15s, and then they, try to single combat a few in between the interaction. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough combat tricks and spells for them to deal with the Mind Meld usually. It's very atypical if they can.
You are one of the players that are running to Mind Meld. I think there was a lot of debate. Do you want to run one? Do you want to run two? What are the reasons? Yada yada.
Mhm.
Why are we running two? Is it mandatory because due to the nerfs now you want to mind melds in order to have a better win condition later in the game.
Exactly, and especially in the Targon matchup, like you aren't winning that matchup without mind meld. It's going to be very difficult to, I should say, unless the opponent like Omega bricks. So when that's the case, even though we're drawing a lot, if we only have one, there is always a chance it's just at the bottom and we just lose to ourselves or lose to our own deck, right? So getting it on the or having two in there makes it very consistent that we're going to have it by turn 8, by turn 9, and that'll be just in time to one shot the filthy Targon gamers.
Filthy Targon the gamers like that because I'm an aggro. Never mind. But also from personal experience, I think you would like mind meld or at least double mind meld because in the matchups that you do not need it, you just discard it. You use it at discard fodder. Or for example, in the matchups that you need it, but you draw it as not ephemeral, but a card that you are just as fleeting, and at the end of the turn you are going to lose it. You do want to have a second copy if the matchup is that crucial.
Exactly. Yep.
But yeah, we have been going through your decks, and what was the actual strategy of the entire lineup? Because if it was for me to guess, just wanted to go for niche decks that you are comfortable with, and nonetheless decks that people not practice a lot against.
Yeah, so that was a large contributing factor, and really the reiterating the Targon deep part that was key too in the decision making. Like I did see it being a strong likelihood that people were going to be bringing Targon decks deep, and I guess Turbo Thralls, and our lineup does pretty well against all those decks. So it's just really targeting those decks, and with the game plan of banning Aurelia Azir every time, because all those decks hard lose to Aurelia Azir.
What doesn't lose or didn't lose in the current patch? The next one maybe so much, but now the tournament is done and dusted. You won it, but you brought the same lineup both in Swiss rounds, both in Top Cut. So would you have changed at any point your lineup, or would you have changed your lineup from Swiss Top Cut and play something different if you were to look back at it?
I mean, it, it'd be it'd be hard to ever say yes to that question with winning. You know what I mean? Like, it performed very well for us, and we got the meta read. The meta read seemed to be on point, and I don't think that we could have chose a better lineup for the meta that we were expecting to run into. To be honest.
Confidence until the end. My lineup is the best. My deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba.
Not necessarily that it's the best lineup per se, right? Like I think each of the decks, if you look at them individually, are like maybe tier 3 at best, but but combined together with a similar objective, seemed really strong.
I think it takes a lot of preparation, especially in top 42, because in the Swiss rounds, alright, you are going to face a mess of strategies, a mess of lineups. You basically are playing Russian roulette. If you're lucky, you're getting in, if not, not. Now with 9 rounds, even more. But in top 42, you kind of know the players, because I think only in the first seasonals we had some unknown names. As the seasonals progressed, got more and more of the casual, usual culprits that are playing tournaments. So kind of know the players that you're going. So
Right.
did that pay a lot of importance? Like, did you prepare specifically having in mind who you are going to face?
Um, not too much. Not too much. I mean, if anything, some of the people who lineups that I knew were going to be in there would be somebody like What Am I, for example, who seemed to make it very obvious that he was going to be bringing triple Targon to the top 32, and like that would be something again that my lineup should like pretty much never lose to, right? With targeting one Targon deck, if they have 3 in their lineup, it should be pretty difficult to lose that matchup. I know Majinbe usually likes Targon decks as well too, but I wouldn't say that I like targeted any specific player or anything. Just more the fact that a large portion of the people. I could see them bringing that deck. It's just a deck that a lot of people are comfortable with, and just kind of toss it into their lineup as a third deck.
So your idea was basically, it is top cut, they need to bring control, they need to bring Targon, I'm going to completely destroy them with my...
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's about the tournament itself, but how did you feel about the format, or would you change anything about the format? We're speaking, of course, about Riot Lock.
hmm I like the format a lot. Yeah, I know there's people who've had issues with it. I mean, this has always been my stance. It's not just my stance now that we won. I wasn't a big fan of when in the first rounds you had to win 5 in a row to be able to make it to the top 32. I like the fact that they changed it. I think the fact that we've seen at the last 2 seasonals a lot of strong, consistent players doing really well. I think that makes a case for the change, and that it's a positive one. And I don't think there's much I'd change about it. I'm not a big fan of uh, some of the other ideas that I've heard, like a single deck format or anything like that. I really like this ban strategy type format, and I think it makes the most sense given the way that the card game is.
I've been asking a lot of people about the format itself, how would they change it? One of the changes that I heard being mentioned was just lower the number of players that are getting in, because you want to play against the top of the top, or at least on broadcast you want to share experiences of the top players. How do you feel about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And why?
That's fair. No, I can agree with that. I don't think you want to cut it too much, but you could probably go down to like 700-800 and be completely fine. Uh, you know, maybe like half would be the exact like the absolute like limit there. Like I wouldn't go below 500. Um, yeah, I think that's all sound reasoning. You could probably decrease the amount of rounds if you did that, and still allow people to get in if they have 2 losses, um, and guaranteed if they have 1. And yeah, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a reasonable recommendation.
Did you get to play in other formats other than Riotlock? And if yes, which was your favorite format?
I did play a team tournament once, where it was like all 3 of us like making the decisions together. I don't know if you'd consider that to be a different format. Uh, that was very interesting. It felt more difficult, honestly, than just playing by yourself, because there's a lot of like, do this, no, do this, no, do this. Even though there's somebody that makes the final decision, it can make it harder or more difficult to focus, and you could see lines that are incorrect, and sometimes you'll see ones that are correct too. But uh, yeah, I think I like the format that we're in the most here.
I mean, if you do not like what your teammates are saying or their decisions, you just mute them, you are the pilot, and you do not care.
That's true.
It pretty much cancels out the aspect of playing with a team, but that's a story for another.
You
Now,
better win that game if you do that.
yeah, now, now it's the real burning question, the most important question. You won the tournament. What are you going to do with the money?
I invest. Yeah, with my finance background, I'm actually for a couple of years I was a licensed stockbroker too, so I have my licenses in that. I'm like very familiar with the markets, and yeah, I'm definitely planning on investing. I'm someone who understands the benefits of investing for the long term, and how it's pretty much an unlosable situation if you know what you're doing. So
Well, now that people are going to see this interview, you can kind of make them a recommendation. If you are winning the seasonal for a small fee, I might teach you how to invest it properly and get some more. Just for a
put
small
it all,
fee.
put it all in Dogecoin. That's all you got to do. I'm just kidding.
Definitely.
Definitely don't do that.
You are the expert. I won't argue with you on this matter.
All your life savings, Dogecoin.
Okay, yeah, we're getting closer to the end of the interview, and one thing that I didn't ask you or we didn't mention, did you practice with anything in particular, or do you have any partners, any people that actually support you or help you preparing for this event?
Yeah. So I practice with two main guys. One of them is Cheeser Dude, and then another one is Banshee Vale, who sometimes goes by Master Dunzo as well. Those are the two people that I really spent a good amount of time with prepping up until between like getting to the top 32 and then playing in the top 32.
I mean, most of the people are having a practice group, and it's nice because you are sharing different opinions, different ideas, and I think I don't know if you agree, you can disagree with me, but even if you do not have the best practice players, practice partners, you at least get a different opinion, and it just puts things in a different light. You are seeing things that normally you.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's important, and yeah, and the people that I practice with too. It wasn't like as large of a group per se, but definitely very strong players and know what they're talking about. So it was very impactful.
Nice to. But now we're at the end of the interview actually, and before I'm leaving you off the hook, I need to ask you this: if you had one more thing, one last thing that you would say to the audience, what would that?
Uh, uh,
Invest in Dogecoin.
put me on the spot. I don't know. Don't smoke quack.
That's a very unique way to end the interview. Thank you, Duckling, for being
Duck puns, you know.
Duck Puns, the best. Duck Puns made by Duckling. Thank you for being around. Congratulations again. Hope to see you performing in the World Championship because we're having definitely a lot of strong players coming from Americas as well from the other. Good luck.
Thanks, Casman, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you for accepting this. And for you, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we had the EU interview. We are now having the Americas interview. So there's two more regions. Don't go anywhere. We're still having two more.